not sadness. It is not a momentary, I feel bad because I broke up with my boyfriend, or I feel bad because I didn't get this dress for my birthday. It is not that. It is extremely serious. It's a clinical situation that happens with someone's mind, body, as well as the mood. I often place suicide at the highest level of rebellion that a person can do. And the reason why is that suicide is never ever a one off incident. It's not like today I'll get up and think, oh, I'm going to go suicide. That is never the case. There have been and there will always be signs and symptoms that that person will show for help.
No rain.
Hello friends and communicators. Welcome to the Naren Agarwal show. See, today's show is very important and close to my heart. Here's the reason why. It's a topic that we are discussing. It's a topic a lot of people need help with, and it's a topic I don't know much about, and I want to get educated by somebody who's a professional, somebody who knows it rather than just people speaking about it here and there. And today we're going to be discussing about depression and suicide. Today we have on board with us Kriti. Kriti Jalan is a licensed mental health therapist and founder of the online mental health community called Mind the Gap. She has completed her master's from Johns Hopkins University and is soon to begin her PhD research from Adler University this year. She has worked with trauma depression focus groups of African American population in the US. I cannot wait to learn from Kriti. Welcome to the show, Miss Kriti Jalan. How are you doing?
Hi, Naren. Thank you so much for this great introduction. I'm good. How are you?
Kriti, I am very well. And more than that, I am excited. I'm excited not because of anything else, but I'm excited to learn. I'm excited to learn today and be a learner from somebody who really knows what they're talking about, as opposed to listening to some Tom, Dick, or Harry on the street about depression and suicide. So without further ado, I want to ask you first, talking about depression, what is depression? What is depression according to you?
Thank you. I think that's a very, very important question to address. And I want to start with saying what depression is not. It's not sadness. It is not a momentary, I feel bad because I broke up with my boyfriend, or I feel bad because I didn't get this dress for my birthday. It is not that. It is extremely serious. It's a clinical situation that happens with someone's mind, body, as well as the mood. So to put it in definition, it's a clinical mood spectrum where for no reason that you can pinpoint, you feel extremely insufficient, you feel low, you feel irritable, and you basically feel like there is no joy in your life, you know. A lot of times depression is often confused with sadness. You know, we always say, hey, I'm so depressed today. You know, it's not that at all. So just understanding that, and specifically because depression sort of plays with your brain, your neural circuits of the brain. It's a chemical imbalance. So a lot of those things combined together, you can give a diagnosis of depression.
Wow. So tell me if this analogy I'm thinking about is correct or not. But I feel like, someone can be hungry, but there's a difference when somebody is malnourished. Hunger is momentary. You might feel hungry right now and done. Malnourished is a condition. It doesn't have to go over or come just across in one moment, but it's a condition, and one has to systematically go after it to treat it. Is that a good, fair comparison?
Yes, that's actually an excellent comparison, to be honest. It definitely is. As malnourishment and hunger go, it's exactly how depression and sadness go as well. In fact, to be diagnosed as depression, you have to go through a checklist, which is fairly easy, fairly simple, but that just the answers or questions of that checklist will make you realize how serious this is. And it's just not a momentary sadness because of a reason. So, yeah.
Wow, I actually have to be honest. I did not know and did not distinguish it like that. Distinguish depression and sadness. I thought, if somebody is very sad, they might be depressed. But that's very interesting. So another question that comes to my mind is, how does someone know that they're depressed, and how do you clinically know that somebody is depressed? What are those checklists? What are some things that you can share with us for self-diagnosis in some sense?
Absolutely. So I think self-diagnosis is very important. So if you have feelings of restlessness, of fatigue, of unnecessary lows in your life, and you can't like put a finger of why this is happening, right? You don't know why you feel like really shitty. So that's when you start questioning and seeing a pattern. Now I am really happy that consumers or just the youth in general, they've become very, very systematic about things, and they're very, very they look into the nitty gritties of what's happening with them. So I encourage all my students to sort of pinpoint their behaviors. And it's not a one-off event. You can never diagnose depression because one day you felt bad. In fact, to diagnose depression from a clinical perspective, you have to go through it over a period of 6 7 months, and then you can come and talk to me about what are your symptoms. Because even if you come to me, say 5 months into, well, I mean 5 weeks into, hey, I'm feeling really bad, I will go back and tell you to sort of look at your behavior, look at your patterns, and see how that's affecting your daily life, right? When we speak about checklists, they're very simple things like, do you feel like getting up in the morning from your bed? Do you feel like brushing your hair? Do you feel like brushing your teeth? Do you feel like you've let people down? Do you feel like talking to your parents about the future? Very more often than not, you can also talk about, hey, do you feel suicidal? So a lot of us, we think that we cannot talk about suicide to a depressed person, right? Because what if they do it? And that's a myth. You have to talk about the fact, hey, are you suicidal? Do you think you want to hurt yourself? If so, I'm going to help you. So those very, very open, real conversations and open communication is the basis of how we um, sort of look at depression.
Wow, wow, that's very insightful. So, when it comes to depression, it's very interesting. You talk about these minor things like brushing your teeth, waking up from the bed. So, if personally, I don't think I've ever been depressed.
Mm-hmm.
But you probably have dealt with people who have been depressed. What are some things that you notice in them that makes them stand out in a way? Not that we look at that and make fun of them, but stand out in a way that there's some patterns that depressed people follow, so that in case we encounter someone around us, we can kind of help and go to them and try and cater to them.
Hard answer to this, there isn't any.
Okay.
Depression doesn't look like something. It looks like you.
Okay.
It looks like your face. It doesn't feel like any particular prescribed way of feeling. It's how you feel and how you adjust to it. So I often tell my kids that depression is like water. You put it in whatever compartment, it's going to take that shape. But it's going to make that particular compartment really, really liquidy and wet, right? It's not that, hey, you can see that this is water or Pepsi or juice, but you do know that there's a liquid there. So that's what depression is. But yes, when you see it from a clinical perspective, or if you know a friend or a family member who's gone through a lot of things in his or her life, you get a fair idea. Hey, you might go through something like depression. How about you want to talk about it? It's not bad to say that. But to assume that, oh, if you're happy and you're smiling, you don't have depression, that's like a myth. If I were to say, like, I remember when I was working in Baltimore, I had a student who was clinically depressed. She'd gone through trauma in her life, and she was the happiest person, which is which is such a strange
Wow.
thing. So she was so happy. She was always helping other people. She was always looking out for her friends and her juniors, but she was clinically depressed, and I had to sit with her every day for, I think, over 6 months, to talk about things and how she felt. And it was literally like the minute she left my office, she used to be really happy and jovial and, smiling in front of everybody. But it was completely different when she was with me. So
So
I feel
I want
lucky.
to pause here real quick. This is okay. This is very interesting. So I think this is a myth in a lot of people's head. If somebody is happy and smiling and jovial all the time, helping people, they can still be depressed.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a prescription that you have to be sad to be depressed. Exactly what I said. Like,
Huh.
you don't have to be sad and depressed and sitting under a rock to be clinically diagnosed. You can be really happy, and you can have all the things that you can do in your life. You can go climb Everest, but you can still be depressed.
Wow. So what is depression in the way that is it how you feel about yourself? Does it have to do with self image? Does it have to do with you creating high expectations of yourself and not fulfilling them, or is it about external people not behaving the way you do, or how does all this work?
Mhm. So it's a culmination of both, Naren. It is when you've had constant. Now I'm saying this with one string of thought. I'm not saying that this always happens, but to take one example, it's when maybe you've had constant failures in your life, and yourself internally you can't bring up all the time. You can't always be like, hey, let's brush it off and let's come back to working on something again. Maybe you don't have that capacity in you yet, but external forces are also not helping you. So your parents are maybe putting you down more. Your friends are belittling you. So it all adds up, and then it starts to burst out in sort of frames, so to speak.
Mm.
um and it's not, as I said, like, it's not a one off thing. It's like a battery of literally 10 different things that play together. And then there is a notion that I'm not good enough. There is a notion that anything that I do is not good enough. So even though it's external and internal factors, it looks always towards the inside, which is why you can't see depression. Your depression is within yourself, right? So that depression is sort of eating your own self.
So it's not like there's a medical kit out there you check and you see somebody has coronavirus. There's nothing like that in depression, you know.
I mean, I
It
wish
is,
there was.
yeah, it's a very internal meter of how somebody holds the self image they have, and how somebody holds them with the self talk that's going on inside.
Yep,
It's a
yep,
wow.
absolutely.
So I wonder, like, a lot of people I think, once I become successful, life is set, I'll be very happy, etc. And now lately we've been seeing so many successful people, so-called successful people, by society's standards. Everybody has their own definition of success, but
Yep.
they are committing suicide. The most, the lately Bollywood actor Mr. Sushant Singh Rajput in India, there was a big incident. So, what do you think? Why do successful people, when they reach heights of fame and success and they have all the comforts that they want, why do they commit suicide? And
Mhm.
why are they depressed?
Um, they're still people. They might have the world's biggest accolades. They might have all the money in their wallets. They're still people. They're still struggling in their own head. There is external professional factors that result in depression. There has been research about it. More so in the acting facility or in the teaching job, these two are very, very highly prone to being depressed. However, it's not like every actor is going to be depressed, right? So it's not important that every actor will face depression or will face anxiety. So similarly, every successful person will also not necessarily be away from depression. It's like a mixed bag, right? Um, the the thing that strikes most about depression is that you might have everything in front of you, but nothing matters because there's a void in your heart that you can't fill. And that void might be
Mm.
philosophical, but it actually, why it's depression is because that plays with your mind. Because, as I said, there are neural circuits in your head and chemical imbalances in your head which result in this void. 30%, 40% resulting in the void. So it's not like, hey, I'm going to be there for you all the time and then you vanish in 6 months. That person is still depressed. That person might have, like, if we talk about an actor, right, that person might have the biggest successes and hits, but maybe that doesn't mean anything to them. That is a very external factor of themselves, which is why it's not like a written fact that, oh, successful people or people who have a lot of money don't have depression and then don't suicide because of that.
I love what you're saying because it really brings to notice the importance of self-reflection and being self-aware. Oftentimes in the journey of life, we're just so focused on the external, doing this, doing that we forget the most important thing to achieve in life, which is the
Yeah.
fullness here. And like you said, if you don't achieve that fullness, it's the void that sets in. It's really amazing that all your answers are pointing to this thing, self-awareness and looking within
And
yourself.
I mean, it's easier said than done. I mean, I can sit in one chair and sit across the table, and as a counselor, I can tell you, hey, you've got to find fulfillment. But if you don't find it, I cannot do anything for to help you find that. A lot of people think like go to a psychologist, go to a counselor, it's going to be cured. But we also have those failures because at times we cannot reach that person as well. I'm of the personal opinion that constant support doesn't come one at a time. Like it's not a one-off event. You have to check in with people every day. If they are on the spectrum, you have to be like just basic things. You have to be kind to people. You have to be. There's no way other than that. To help a long-term depressive state to reduce. I think that's just the basics of communication, I feel.
So I was going to get to that. If somebody is depressed, a friend a family member what are some ways you can help them? And is communication one of the greatest keys, you would say? So in what ways can you help a friend, a family member that is depressed?
Mm-hmm. So even in MDG, which is Mind the Gap, we just had the week of depression. There are some ways that you can help a person or yourself when you're depressed. You can get a therapy dog. You can get a therapy dog. You can get a therapy animal. It doesn't have to be a dog. It's called an emotional support animal. They are trained to emotionally check in with you through different ways of expressions and just way that they behave. As a support giver, definitely encouraging conversations is one of the key factors of depression.
Hmm.
A lot of us in society, we try to shun it away. Even though I might know that you have depression, or even though I might know that you might have faced depression, I will not talk about it because I'm like, hey, they might feel bad. That's number one. No, talk about it. Make it a normal factor. Like if you have diabetes, people are not going to not talk about diabetes. They will ask you, hey, is your blood sugar fine now? How was your score last time? Are you eating sweets? We talk about it. It's a normal thing. Similarly, if you have depression, you should talk about. I mean, if your family has depression, you should talk about it. You should say, "Hey, how are you doing? Are you taking your medications? Have you gone to a therapist?" Having that conversation is very, very important because then that makes the person feel that okay, now somebody is interested. Somebody is looking out for me. Even though they might not directly help me, but they're looking out, and I have to be answerable to that person. Human beings are really strange. That's what my understanding of psychology is. Unless it's externally driven, 20% of the times we don't do things that we're supposed to do. So if I know that there's someone checking on me, I need to do it for that person and not for me, essentially.
Wow, that's really the power of connection. I mean, I would say what I hear from you is really interesting. That establishing that connection and talking about it is very important because if a person feels connected, whether it's an animal, whether it's a
Hmm.
person, they are much likely to try and help themselves.
Yep.
Mm.
Because then you feel like you're important to someone else, and then you feel like you're taking that
Wow.
onus on you. So it's essentially selfish. If you look at the core of it, it's like, hey, that person is relying on me to tell them my answers of how I'm doing with depression. So I should do better. It's more external, but it's more helpful that way.
Wow. I had a question. Yes. What's your opinion on medication? Some people I hear out there and there's an industry that some people say the medications are there to get you hooked on.
Hmm.
And if you take the medication, you'll always be hooked onto the medication. You will not be able to get out of depression and fix yourself. What's your opinion on medicating people who are depressed?
Um, if you would have asked me this question like 3 years back, I would have been like, no, it's not allowed. It shouldn't be the case. People get depressed, even more depressed because of medications. It will push you down a hole which you can't get out, and all of that, right?
Yes.
But when I sort of did my research, when I understood what and why medications are given, um, it became clear that medicines were not the only answer. So if you only take medicine, it's not going to help. You can pop those pills every day, every night. You're not going to get out of depression. Medication with restorative practices, with therapy, with lifestyle changes, that's going to help. I personally believe that even restorative practices for milder and moderate cases, or like therapy practices for milder and moderate cases, it's more than enough. You don't need medication for that. However, there are extremely severe clinical cases for which, as I said, the brain starts reacting to chemical imbalances. So you need an external chemical to put it back in order. So I might be doing all my therapeutic practices with you and therapies with you, but if your brain is not registering, if your brain has like some sort of chemical imbalance, all of the other things falter, right? Your attention span goes, your remembrance goes, your intelligence goes. And I especially work with memory and attention and intelligence and cognition, emotion, right? But if that's not working fully, then my practice will not help you. So I feel like it's more like a hand in hand situation, but definitely it's case wise. It's not like support medication, though, and everybody will be happy with medication. That's not how it will work.
Yeah. So I personally I'm big into meditation. Do you think meditation is powerful as a tool to help people get out of depression? And I know there's studies that show that meditation, certain types of meditation, can help restore the chemical imbalances and the imbalances we have within ourselves. What's your opinion as somebody who's certified?
Yep. Um, Meditation definitely helps. It is one of the foremost things that you should do, primarily because depression is something you're dealing with within yourself, and meditation is about going within yourself. So it's more like a restorative practice. Um, However, I definitely believe that meditation doesn't look the same for everyone. I, for one, cannot sit with my eyes shut for a long time, and that's just how I am. So there are different kinds of meditations. There are different kinds of breathing practices or mindfulness that brings you together to the present that you're living. With my children, I often do the five senses activity. It's very, very simple. It will bring you back to the present, the five senses. You think what you're
Tell us
seeing.
more about it. Tell us more about it. The five senses
So
activity.
yeah, so the five senses is basically you sit with your therapist or you sit with any group, and you with your eyes open, because I can't do meditation with eyes closed. So I had to go find something that I can do with my eyes open. So with your eyes open, the therapist or the facilitator says, think about the five things that you're seeing currently. Think about the four things that you're hearing currently. Think about the three things that you're smelling currently. Think about the two things that you're touching or feeling currently. And think of the first thing that comes to your mind when I say breath. So those things all, I mean, it is a huge, like it's a 15 to 20-minute practice. And my voice is not like this. It's very, very calm and singy songy. But yeah, I mean, that really helps most of my children because it's quick. You don't have to sit with your eyes closed. It's very daunting for some people to sit with that posture and, all of that. So it's a very quick method. I remember when I was for one of my classes in Hopkins, my professor gave me those kisses chocolate, and that was our meditation for the day. So like he was directing it. He was like, open the chocolate and see what the wrapper is, what the shape is, see how many folds it has. So it's basically anything essentially that will bring you to the present of what you're doing, right? That's what meditation is for me, at least, and it definitely helps with depression. Definitely.
Mm. I feel like, yeah, we are often living in a way where we have these two huge sacks that we are pulling. One is a sack of the past, all the memory from the past, and one is a sack of all the stuff that we have coming in the future. And we're trying to live life with these two heavy
Yeah.
sacks walking. And I guess when you let them loose in meditation, you just feel relieved, you feel light, you feel okay, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So the exercise you talked about, I really felt it was like, cutting loose of those two huge heavy sacks that we typically tend to carry, the past and the future, on our back. Is there any such thing that an average person goes through depression once in their life? Any such thing, or are there any standard guidelines? Does it happen to everyone or not?
Um, Interesting question, actually. So there is something called seasonal depression. That is a subset of depression almost. It's called so because of the seasons that you're living in. A lot of people in America, they face seasonal depression because of the winter. Chicago has some of the highest rates of depression in winter, and it's changed because Chicago otherwise is a really fun city, is what I heard. But through the research, it shows that Chicago is extremely fluctuating when it comes to depression rates, specifically in during the winters because of the cold, harsh conditions. So yes, there are subsets of depression, and a person who's in that state at that season doesn't mean that you're going to be like that for the rest of your life, for the rest of your years. But it's just because of external factors which are out of your control, which is making you feel really weird and really murky inside. So yes, there are people who go through that phase, but there aren't any sort of like guidelines, or there isn't any like skeleton so as to why like you have to face depression, or this is what's going to happen when you face depression. It's not like that. A lot of times people don't even realize that they have depression, and they've uh, coped with it. Later a lot of people think, oh my god, that year it was bad for me. Maybe I was going through depression, or maybe it was really mild, but it did affect me in some way. So it's not necessary like everything will lead to self harm or suicide, but it has various sort of levels of control.
Okay, so here's a tough question I have for you. When we diagnose somebody as depressed, they sort of take it as an identity. Okay, I am depressed. But I wonder if that also works against them being able to recover. Because if I accept something as really part of my identity, I wonder if it comes in the way of now me overcoming it. James Clear has this interesting book where he talks about the importance of identity. And once you identify with
Mm-hmm.
something, it becomes very clear that you do such actions and adopt such behaviors. So, what about a person who then gets certified as depressed and they take on their identity? Would that trouble them in some way, and could that also harm them?
Mm-hmm. I love this question, by the way. I'll tell you why. Because the whole idea is how you look at the entire spectrum of mental health. So I'll give you a quick example. When you're diagnosed with hypertension, do you stop living your life? Do you stop doing everything it is that you're doing and say, oh my God, I have hypertension. Now I have to sit in one corner and be upset about life? No, you're like, okay, I'm just gonna get medicated and go on with my life, not take tension, not probably shout at kids, then I'm gonna be happy in life, right? Similarly,
Yeah.
when you are faced with a mental health issue when someone diagnoses you, why does that become such a huge, like, oh my God, I have anxiety, or oh my God, I have depression? Because of the stigma that we've attached to it, because of the, oh my God, this is a mental issue, huh? You have mental problems. That's, we have to break that. The minute we break
Mm.
that, people will not see it as like, my life is over now, I can't do anything. Another thing is that we are shifting from calling someone depressed, and we're making it more, you are going through depression. So it's not like
Mm.
it's not like you're being labeled as a depressed person. You're just saying that in your life, you have depression, and that's a normal part of life. You're going to get over it. That sort of language has changed very recently.
That's really powerful, I think. Okay, that's cool that we're
Yeah.
changing that language. That answers my question. Thanks for that insight.
Yeah.
So, Kriti, moving on to suicide, this is a very sensitive topic, and it's something that I find very tough to answer. Based on notes, based on the studies that you've done, why do people commit suicide? Why do they think they cannot recover? What goes on in a person's head? I know subjectively it's different, but in general, what are these patterns? What goes on in a person's head? Who decides to take their own life?
Um, Suicide is difficult. It's tough. It is uncomfortable for everybody around them, um, because it's really just showing everybody a mirror. It's I often place suicide at the highest level of rebellion that a person can do. And the reason why is that suicide is never ever a one-off incident. It's not like today I'll get up and think, oh, I'm going to go suicide. That is never the case. There have been and there will always be signs and symptoms that that person will show for help. That person is trying to reach out. And once that person is being cut off time and again, does that turn into, you know what, you don't care about me, I'm going to show you how it feels for me to not be in your life. So it is, I mean, and like I've had to deal with students who've had parents who suicided, who've had grandparents who suicided, and it's tough because it's always like a remorse, like, hey, I could have helped them out, right? um, and it's just that it's never a one-off thing, and that's the scary part. Like, you're that person is right in front of you, they're trying to reach out to you, but you just don't see it, and saying things like, yeah, I'm going to be there for you, it doesn't help. You have to genuinely be there for someone. um, what goes on in their minds, I think it's a lot of helplessness, it's a lot of anger which has turned into hurt. And that can be for many reasons. That can be anger towards external beings, that can be anger towards jobs, that can be anger towards themselves. It's just anger which is then, it's like a helpless angry state. So it's not that you're angry so you want to hit somebody, you're so angry that you don't have people to hit, so you're hitting yourself. You understand that concept, that
Ah,
helplessness and loneliness that they feel in their head. And I mean, to be honest, like, suicide has been romanticized in movies and in books and stuff, but it doesn't come close to the reality. And it's just, and a lot of people tell me, hey, they didn't have any reason to suicide, or hey, they were selfish. I mean, yeah, you were selfish when you didn't check on them. So they've done whatever it is that they thought necessary at that time, you know? So it's just very, very difficult to deal with, even as a third person who's been trained to not be affected by, people's lives and stuff. But it is, death is eventually very, very difficult.
wow, the stuff that catches my head, the phrase that you mentioned, the highest form of rebellion. It reminds me of instances in ancient India where there were kingdoms, and when they used to be attacked by other kingdoms, and the kingdom that is being attacked knew that the women were going to be raped and they were being going to be ill treated. The women used to burn this fire up and cause ritual suicide, and that is also a form of rebellion. That, okay, you're attacking my nation, I'm going to rebel by taking my own life, and we're going to just go. And that's a form of rebellion. So it really struck that chord. And I just never had thought of that in that phrase, suicide being a highest form of rebellion. It's almost like I'm looking at suicide from a different angle now. It's really scary. It gave me goosebumps right now when you said that it's not a one-off thing, that the
Yeah,
person
yeah.
has been trying to seek attention, but they never got help and they never got that attention. That is scary to me. And it makes me question, how can we try and seek out to people and notice people who have suicidal tendencies? What are some ways, what are some things I can do from today, Kriti? Please tell me.
I think that's just, I mean, I know I'm lost of words as well, Naren. I think being able to definitely hear, you speak about communication, and I remember you did a conversation about how is hearing and listening different. Definitely hearing another person, not only with your ears, but with your heart, with your soul, with your body, showing that you're there for them. A lot of the times we have conversations in silences, and that's the best conversation. You don't have to call them up and say, hey, are you okay? Or is everything okay? Tell me. A lot of the times that comes across as gossip. Like, you want gossip, nah, about my life. I'll give you, but now is not the time. When that person is even texting, if you think, someone is on the spectrum, that's what I do with my friends and my relatives or whoever I know. If I think they are going through something, I always just give them like a text. Hey, I'm here, you don't have to talk to me, you don't have to like ask for a reply, you can just whatever tell me and I'll take it in and it will be out of your system. Why that's important is because It comes out of their system. It's very important for someone to speak. It doesn't matter if communication, right? It's not important that you have to speak to somebody. It's important that you speak out of your body, that those toxins releases from your own body. I was having this really interesting conversation with one of my colleagues, and I was telling him that you might have these things in your head, and as very evolved human beings, we know that we shouldn't feel like that. So we've trained our mind to not feel something, right? But our body will still feel that because our body has memory, our cells have memory. Your body will still feel what you might have felt, and that you've trained your mind to not feel. So getting that
Wow.
out from your body is very, very important. So I feel like checking in, letting them know, hey, at the back end of all your people, I'm there. If you please, like, I can be the last person you want to come to, but please come to me. So that just getting all your friends to know that, hey, this is what I'm here for. I don't want to solve your problems. I want to hear your problems. That's the main step of work that at least I want to do with all my relatives and all my friends, right? One more thing that I really think would help is spending quality time. And I know it's difficult because it's COVID, but just sort of checking in with your friends, like getting on a group call with your friends and definitely inviting one particular person that you think you always need, leave out. Getting them on, saying, hey, what's up? Come on a group call. Call them separately if you have to, but tell them that we want you here. We want to listen to how your day is going. I think those kind of very small, very effortless conversations really make a big deal for someone who's trying to get any sign from the world that does anybody care at all.
Wow. An imagery that came to my mind when you were talking about that is like we have almost this carpet in our mind, and when any problem comes, we lift it up and we put it under the carpet so everything looks very pretty. And we
Yep.
have so much of filth under the carpet that we don't address, but our body feels it. And I guess when we speak it out, like you're saying, we just let that carpet lift up a little bit and let that filth go out that we've been collecting because we want to live this perfect and prescription life
Mm-hmm.
and not
You know
accepting the
that
way. Yeah.
that actually also reminded me of one more thing. I often tell my kids, and that I did that with myself as well. Um, a lot of us write journals, right? I used to write journals when I was younger, like when I was younger. And then I realized that at the end of it, that journal has now become my self. Like it's an extension of me. So I mean, that is also not going to help me because everything that I think is now in that journal, but I'm still holding on to that, right? So it's more symbolic. You have to look at it in a very symbolic manner that you're still holding on to something. You broke up with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, but you still hold on to a gift that they give. Why? Because your body still wants is forcing you to remember that one thing. The minute you let go of that, it's difficult. It's gonna be a lot of work. It's gonna be extremely difficult. But the minute you do that, it's really fulfilling in your own life.
Wow. So what are some ways that you can let go? One is talking to somebody and saying it. Are there some other ways that you can let go of such energy within yourself?
Yeah. Physical exercise. It has been proven to be extremely helpful. Like it has been one of the most groundbreaking researches how much physical exercise can remove toxins of your body. We've all heard our moms say exams are on the way. Go to the gym and exercise a little bit. Why? Because your brain starts reacting in a better manner. Because when you exercise, you release hormones. That is a biochemical way of releasing stuff like stress from your body. Another thing that I often used to follow was instead of writing a journal, I used to find any scrap of paper. I used to write on that, not write any name, not write my name, just write whatever it is that I'm feeling, make an aeroplane and throw it. I don't know who has such aeroplanes. I hope nobody does, but it's just out of my body. It's a visual representation of, so finding those visual cues of letting go is very important. It shouldn't be only in your mind.
That's pretty cool. I love the concept of letting it go. And even if it's a journal, if you keep it with yourself, it'll be an extension of yourself. So If you're having crazy thoughts, write it on a paper, let it go. Wow, that's pretty cool. Or burn it on the fire. That's a
Yeah, yeah,
important one
yeah,
too. Yeah.
yeah. That's symbolical as well.
Wow. Wow. Kriti, oftentimes you hit upon this. We're scared to approach somebody if we feel like they're suicidal and ask them. What's a good way to ask? And does asking worsen it or makes it better? Because oftentimes we are scared. Like if we mention suicide, if it's not in their head, they'll start thinking about it. Or if we mention suicide, they might be prone to doing it. What's the right way to think about it?
This was a very hot debate topic when I was in masters, and I had the same thing. I was like, if I mention someone who's on the spectrum, and if I mention, hey, are you thinking of harming yourself or are you thinking of suicide? What if they go and do it? Like I don't want to be the reason for why they take their life. But research has shown otherwise. There has been clinical scientific data that backs this. It is okay to ask someone if they're thinking of suiciding or self harming, because it will make them, the whole idea of you are asking them whether they're okay in a life and death manner. It's not about are you okay or are you sad or happy today, are you, it's not that. It is that you're showing them that I am concerned of the fact that you need to live, you cannot die. That's the representation of that sentence. It's not that, hey, are you thinking of dying, don't die. It's not that. It's saying I am scared that if you do this I'll be upset. It's more of that representation. You mentioned how to ask it, really simple things, and like don't make it flowery. Don't beat around the bush to say, hey, I know things are difficult. I know life is tough for you right now. Are you thinking of harming yourself? Have you ever felt that you've needed to harm yourself? If that is so, please let me know. I would help to be there. I mean, it would be really nice if I can be there to help you. So just asking that, hey, are you thinking of harming yourself? That sort of releases a lot of uh, built up tension. You know, with my student as well, there was once that she had a history of harming others, and she'd been behind bars quite a few times. But the reason why I asked her, and I was like, hey, if this is a very important factor of your life, I'm not judging you for it. I need to help you to get out of it. So that sort of really basic is what can help.
Uh, a quick question here is, if someone is suicidal, do they have to be depressed or can someone be suicidal without being depressed?
No, they're not intertwined at all.
Okay.
Someone can be suicidal and not be depressed, and someone can be depressed and not be suicidal. It basically just comes down to how you cope with either of it, and one is not a predisposing factor for the other. That's not how it
Okay,
is.
so that's interesting for me. I want to dig deep a little here. If someone is suicidal, doesn't mean they have to go through depression. So what's an example of somebody who would be suicidal or something that you've seen, somebody who was suicidal but was not depressed?
Farmers, Indian farmers, they kill themselves because they don't think there is any other way that they can lead on with life. They have so much financial issues, they have so many loans to pay. They would rather just kill themselves than go through the whole thing. And that's also helplessness, that's also rebellion, but that's not depression.
Oh, that's an interesting insight, because I think most people tend to think, and I would tend to think that if somebody's suicidal, they are probably depressed, but that's not always the case. And that's an eye opener for me. Thank you. So, Kriti, one final question for you. What are some do it yourself, do it at home, cure yourself from depression things that you can suggest to people who are listening to this, people who are watching this?
um thank you for that question. There's something called CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy, that we perform as clinicians on students, I mean on clients and students as well. You can also do a version of it at your home. What it means is the way you think will determine how you feel, which will determine how you act. That's the connection. So your thoughts will determine your feeling, which will determine your action. There are two types of thoughts, right? There's an irrational thought, which makes no sense, and there's a rational thought, which is what people function on normally. When you start feeling bad about something, 70 to 80% of the time, it's because your mind has thought about that situation irrationally. So something like, if someone didn't give me a compliment, right? It For me, it might just be, hey, he didn't give me a compliment means I'm not good looking enough, or I'm not worth it, which means, hey, I'm going to be very, very upset about this situation with him. So it just basically means that I'm digging my own grave in my head. But for an external person, it's just that maybe you look good every day. You don't have to get compliments every day. It can be as simple as that. But our minds don't get that thought pattern or that thinking pattern. How you can, and by the way, it happens within a millisecond. It's very difficult to think if you don't know that you're feeling that, or if you don't know you're having that irrational or rational thought. So taking a minute, the ideal is you take a minute and you realize what your thought is, put it in the compartment in your head. Am I thinking it irrationally, or am I thinking it rationally? I'm not saying don't think that thought. I'm saying know which spectrum that falls. Accordingly, you can behave. So if it's an irrational thought, any human being would just be like, that's the stupidest thing that can happen. Chalk it. But if you don't know that's an irrational thought, it's gonna create a lot of issues in your life personally. Step A to do that is writing your thoughts every day. That doesn't mean you have to like journal or something, just sort of being mindful. If writing is not your forte, putting it on a phone or putting it up as like a private Instagram story, whatever helps you. It doesn't have to be writing in old school. It can just be sitting in front of the mirror and saying, hey, this is what I thought today. Was it irrational or rational? Just being really mindful of that. Rest, your body will do all of that other things, but just being mindful of the first hit that comes in your mind.
That's pretty cool. I love that you said it's not about telling yourself not to have that thought. It's just about realizing the kind of thought it is. I think that's super powerful. That's super powerful right there.
Thank you.
Kriti, thank you. It was so wonderful to have you on the show and discuss about this. I can assure that I learned so much. Some of the things that I learned that stood out for me was, number one, that sadness is not equal to depression. They are both very different things. The stigma around depression should go. And it's really cool that we have now started talking about how people are going through a depressed state rather than saying they are depressed and putting a tag on them, because I think that calls for the stigma, like you said. And the other thing was learning about suicide and how it can be prevented, and just simple things like talking to people, actually doing acts of being there rather than just saying I am there. Just some small, simple things can prevent a huge happening. And just being direct about, hey, are you going through these thoughts, rather than being all flowery and beating around the bush. This was awesome. And the last thing that you said, the CBT, that's very powerful. Thanks so much, Kriti. Before I let you go, do you have any questions for me or any final comments that you would like to make?
I want to ask you something. I think, so you've been speaking about communication. You've been speaking about how you can better your communication. But at an office level, if you'd like to talk about how as a boss, or how as a founder or something of like a company, how can you be there for your employees without crossing that boundary of an over intrusive boss?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. So one thing that I really like to operate from is, when I'm making organizational decisions, I like to be the chief blank manager, chief blank officer, whatever I am, or whatever you are, the founder. But when it comes to outside business work, sometimes it's okay to allow yourself to be the Kriti Jalan, you don't have to be the founder. And I think that difference, when you start maintaining it and when you communicate to your employees and the people around you that, hey, this time we're talking business, we're talking about the organization, we're talking about the NGO, and this role, this personality that I'm taking upon is that of the founder. This is no longer the Kriti Jalan that you know in person. And hence the decision that I'm making, the decision that we're making, the feedback that I'm giving you, the exchanges we're having is on a professional level. when they have that clarity, I think they are more accepting and open to receiving, even if it's a negative criticism, because you've established the relation and you've set the context right. And after that, when you're out of the office or even within the office during lunch break or during a time when you speak as Kriti, they understand, okay, yeah. They got a responsibility they are fulfilling. So it's not personal when they're talking business, but when they're talking personal, I can seek for support and I can ask for personal help. So I think it's really about setting the context right in their head more than ours, that hey, this is the founder in me and this is the Kriti Jalan in me, playing different roles at different times and different settings. So I think that could be really powerful.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you so much for this. In fact, I enjoyed myself thoroughly.
Kriti, looking forward to maybe speaking with you in the future more about psychology and learning stuff. I know you got a PhD research coming up this year. I'll be curious to stay up to date with that. And thanks very much for being on the show and educating us on something so important right now and giving us actual tips and tricks to help cope with what's going on around the world, suicide and depression in many ways. Thanks so much, Kriti.
Thank you. I enjoyed myself thoroughly.